Have you ever been judged before you even said a word? Imagine stepping onto a plane you paid for sitting in first class, yet treated like you don't belong. No anger, no outburst, just silence. A silence that sees everything. What would you do if someone looked at you and only saw your color, not your story, not your worth, not your humanity? Would you confront them? Walk away? Or would you wait and let the world see who truly holds the power? This is the story of Darius Cole, a calm, successful black CEO who was ignored, humiliated, and underestimated at 35,000 feet. But what the crew didn't know was that the man they disrespected quietly owned the future of their entire airline. It's not just a story about revenge, it's about justice, dignity, and how one man's silence became the loudest message the world could hear. If you've ever felt invisible, this story is for you. Because sometimes the strongest response is delivered after landing. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe respect should never depend on appearance. Let's begin the story. The cameras were already waiting when the plane touched down. Dozens of flashes burst like lightning against the dull gray of the San Francisco afternoon. A single man stepped out of the jetway, tall, calm, dressed in a charcoal suit that didn't scream luxury but whispered authority. His name was Darius Cole, and in the next 10 minutes, the entire airline industry would know it. 3 hours earlier, he was just another passenger, another black man traveling first class, with strangers wondering if he truly belonged there. Now, he was the owner of the very company that humiliated him. The terminal buzzed with Friday energy, business travelers in crisp shirts, families clutching carry-ons, and a dozen gate calls echoing through the air. At gate A17, flight North Sky 432 to San Francisco was boarding. Darius adjusted his cufflinks, checked his watch, and exhaled quietly. He hated flying not because of fear, but because of the routine he'd learned too well. Every trip brought some version of the same story: suspicion, surprise, or subtle disrespect. It was like turbulence he couldn't avoid. The agent at the gate scanned his ticket and hesitated for half a second. It was always that half second that told the story. "Mr. Cole." "Yes," he replied, smiling politely. "Welcome aboard, sir," she said quickly, forcing a smile as she waved him through. Inside the jet bridge, the smell of coffee and metal filled the air. He stepped into the cabin's soft lighting, polished brass, and the hush of luxury that first class tried to sell. His seat was 2A, window, plenty of legroom. He sat down, slipped his phone into airplane mode, and looked out at the tarmac. Across the aisle, a man stumbled in a white guy in his 50s, red-faced, holding a phone and a whiskey-to-go cup. "Excuse me," the man slurred. "You're in, 2A, right?" Darius nodded. "I'm 2B, the man said, tossing his bag overhead and collapsing into the seat. He offered a lazy grin. "Name's Grant Doyle, Regional Director, North Sky Airlines, flying back to the coast." Darius nodded again. "Pleasure." "Big meeting?" Grant asked, eyeing Darius's understated suit. "Something like that," Darius replied, voice even. Then came Megan Hart. She moved down the aisle like she owned it 37, confident, polished. Her tone was honey to the white businessmen in row 1. "Can I offer you a drink before takeoff?" "Mr. Peters." Her laughter floated across the cabin, warm and practiced. When she reached Darius, the warmth disappeared. Her voice flattened. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Darius handed it over. Calm as always. She studied it a second too long. "First class is rows 1 and 2, she said automatically. "I know," he replied. "That's my seat." She blinked. "Right. Of course." Her smile was tight, brittle, and gone in a heartbeat. No, can I get you something to drink? No towel. Just silence. Across the aisle. Grant chuckled. You'd think she'd recognize one of her own directors. Darius said nothing. He'd learned that silence could speak louder than any argument. As the plane pushed back, Darius closed his eyes. The engines roared, the cabin shook, and the metal bird climbed toward the sky. He opened his laptop and began reviewing numbers AI contracts, equity valuations, defense proposals. Numbers didn't discriminate. They didn't care what you looked like. That's why he loved them. 10 minutes into the flight, Megan came through the cabin again. She poured Grant another whiskey. She asked the woman in 1B if she'd like more champagne. She passed Darius without stopping. He pressed the call button once. The small orange light glowed above his seat, and stayed glowing. Across from him. Grant smirked. Guess she's got her hands full, he said, swirling his drink. Darius ignored him. He waited another 2 minutes, then quietly noted the time in his phone. 4:07 p.m. Request ignored. He pressed the button again. Nothing. The second attendant, a young Latina woman named Elena Ruiz, peeked out from behind the curtain. She saw the light, saw Megan walk past it, and frowned. When Megan turned her back, Elena moved quickly. She bent down beside Darius's seat and whispered, "I'm sorry, sir. She was supposed to come by. Here water, and some almonds. Don't tell her I gave these." Darius smiled faintly. "Thank you. What's your name, Elena?" she said, almost shyly. He nodded. "I appreciate your kindness. Elena." She smiled and slipped away. He looked at the small bottle of water in his hand, something so small yet heavy with meaning. Every time it happened, it reminded him of the same lesson: respect wasn't guaranteed. No matter how high you climbed, it had to be demanded or designed into the system. The captain's voice broke through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be cruising at 35,000 feet. Expect a smooth ride." Outside, clouds stretched like white oceans. Inside, silence. Half an hour passed. Megan came by again, laughing with Grant. Another one. "You read my mind," Grant said, tapping his empty glass. She poured him another. The smell of alcohol drifted across the aisle. Darius pressed the call button a third time. Megan's eyes flicked toward him, then away. He heard her mutter under her breath, "Some people are never satisfied." That was the moment something in him shifted. Not anger, not surprise, just a cold clarity. The kind that precedes decisions that change everything. He took out his phone and began typing. Message to Leah Porter, his executive assistant back in Washington, D.C. "Leah, find me everything you can on Apex Aviation Group. Parent company of North Sky Airlines. Current valuation, debt, ownership structure, urgent." He sent it, then set the phone face down, leaned back, and closed his eyes. From the outside, he looked calm, but behind the stillness, calculations were forming like storm clouds. Grant was talking again, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This company's going downhill." He laughed. "Management's a joke. We're bleeding money. Hell, I heard the board's thinking of selling, probably to some foreign investor." Darius opened his eyes. "Selling?" he asked casually. Grant grinned. "Oh, yeah. Can't keep the lights on forever. But that's off the record, my friend." Darius nodded slowly. "Understood." He picked up his phone again, typed a single line. "They may be open to a sale. Confirm immediately." Elena passed by again, refilling glasses. When she reached him, she paused. "Do you need anything, Mr. Cole?" she asked softly. He smiled. "Just honesty. That's hard to find these days." She hesitated. For what it's worth, not everyone here is like her. I know, he said. Sometimes good people stay quiet because they're afraid. You don't have to be. Her eyes glistened slightly. Then she nodded and walked on. Another message buzzed in. Leah had responded. Their stock dropped 18% last quarter. CEO is under investigation. Heavy debt exposure. Market value about $6 billion. Could be acquired for under 3.5 if we move fast. Darius read it twice. The corner of his mouth lifted. He typed back, prepare a purchase proposal. Secure a controlling stake before we land. Use Caleb if needed. He hit send, then looked out the window, down at the layers of clouds. From above, even storms looked peaceful. He thought of his mother then, of the day she told him, "Son, when the world tries to shrink you, don't fight smaller, grow bigger." He'd built his company on that truth. Now, sitting 35,000 feet above the ground, he realized he was about to live it again. Megan returned one last time before descent. She leaned toward him, voice low. "Sir, we've had a few complaints about you pressing the call button repeatedly. If you're unsatisfied with our service, you can file a report after landing." He looked at her calmly. "I already have," he said. She blinked. "I beg your pardon?" He smiled. "Don't worry. You'll see soon enough." She straightened, scoffing quietly as she walked away. The seatbelt sign chimed. The plane began its slow descent. The captain announced they'd be landing in San Francisco in 20 minutes. Darius's phone buzzed again. It was a single message from Leah. Control secured. 51% stake acquired. You now own Apex Aviation Group and North Sky Airlines. He read it once, then whispered, almost to himself, "Justice doesn't always need a courtroom." The wheels touched down with a soft thud. Passengers applauded politely. Grant turned to him, half drunk. "Hey, you seem like a smart guy. You invest. Maybe you should buy this damn airline, fix it yourself." Darius looked at him, eyes calm and unblinking. "Maybe I just did." Grant laughed, thinking it was a joke. When the door opened, sunlight poured into the cabin. Megan stood by the exit, perfect smile in place. "Thank you for flying with North Sky, Mr. Cole. Was it?" He met her eyes for the first time since takeoff. "Yes," he said. "And thank you, Ms. Hart. This flight was enlightening." She frowned, unsure if it was sarcasm. As he stepped out of the aircraft, cameras and reporters swarmed the gate. The air filled with shouts. "Mr. Cole, Mr. Cole, is it true you just bought Apex Aviation Group?" He adjusted his jacket, looked directly into the nearest camera, and said, "Some lessons are best learned at 35,000 feet. The flashes went off again, and that's how it began. The first-class cabin smelled of citrus polish and burnt coffee. Somewhere behind the curtain, a baby cried, muffled by the hum of engines. Darius Cole stared at the untouched glass of water on his tray table. Outside the window, San Francisco sunlight cut through the clouds like white knives. He was still thinking about the look on Megan Hart's face when he had stepped off the plane. Polite smile, nervous eyes. She didn't know yet, but she would soon, 3 hours earlier, at 35,000 feet. Humiliation had worn its quietest mask. Megan's voice had been sugar for everyone but him. Mr. Peters, more champagne, Mr. Doyle, another bourbon laughter, clinking glass. The smell of privilege served warm. When she reached Darius, the tone shifted as if someone dimmed a light. "Would you like anything?" she had asked once, without waiting for an answer. Her body already half turned away. He had answered softly, "Just some water. Please." but the words had fallen into the hum of the engines, ignored the way one ignores background noise. A second attendant, Elena Ruiz, had caught the moment. Her eyes flickered with apology. He had nodded, a gesture that said, "I see you. It's enough." Grant Doyle, his seatmate, had been bragging about quarterly numbers he barely understood. Our region's bleeding. Man, flights half full. But hey, bonuses still come through. He laughed at his own joke and spilled bourbon on his tie. Megan was there instantly, blotting the stain, smiling like he was royalty. Darius could almost hear the unspoken hierarchy who was worthy of care and who was not. He wrote nothing then. He simply observed, storing details like a patient chess player memorizing the board. People often mistook his silence for passivity. It wasn't. It was data collection. When he pressed the call button the first time, he counted silently to 60. No one came. The second time, he waited 90 seconds. Still nothing. The third, 2 full minutes. He noted the times on his phone. 4:07 p.m., 4:09, 4:11. Precision was his armor. Facts were his witnesses. Megan passed again, balancing a tray. Her perfume lingered a heartbeat too long. She smiled at Grant, laughed at his joke, and brushed crumbs from his sleeve with exaggerated charm. Then she saw the lit button above 2A. Her jaw tightened. She reached up and turned it off without looking at him. Darius felt a small pulse of anger, then pushed it down. His mother's voice echoed from years ago. Don't let them rent space in your head for free. He leaned back, forcing his breath into rhythm with the engines. Calm wasn't surrender. Calm was control. 10 minutes later, Elena approached again, this time with a paper cup. "Here," she whispered, slipping it onto his tray. "The good glasses are locked up. But thank you," he said. Her eyes darted toward Megan. "She'll be angry if she sees." "I won't tell," he promised. She smiled, a real one, tired and kind. Some of us notice things we wish we didn't. He nodded. "Keep noticing. It's how things change." When she moved on, Darius took a sip of the lukewarm water. It tasted faintly metallic, but it steadied him. He looked around the cabin, 4 rows, 8 passengers, 2 attendants, 1 system. It was a microcosm of every boardroom he had ever entered. The scenery changed, but the script rarely did. Grant had started talking again. "You know what the problem is? Coal. Too many diversity hires. Excuse my French. People who don't fit the culture. Brings the whole place down." Darius turned his head slowly. "What culture is that?" Grant chuckled. "You know, old school service. The North Sky way." Darius smiled thinly. "Interesting. I run a company where culture is measured by how people treat the quietest voice in the room." Grant blinked, uncertain whether it was an insult. He poured himself another drink instead. Darius opened his laptop. The glow of spreadsheets reflected in his calm eyes. Numbers, lines, percentages. They didn't flinch. They didn't assume. They simply obeyed logic. He preferred them to people. At 4:26 p.m., Megan finally stopped beside him. "Sir, would you care for dinner, chicken or pasta? Whichever you recommend," he said. She frowned slightly. "It's the same either way." "Then surprise me." She hesitated, as if unsure whether he was mocking her. "Chicken." Then she placed the tray with a clatter, nearly spilling the sauce. "Careful. It's hot." "Thank you," he said evenly. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Enjoy." He ate slowly, deliberately. The food was bland, but he tasted more than flavor. He tasted the hierarchy baked into every polite interaction. Halfway through the meal, Thomas Reed, The flight supervisor appeared. His tie was loose, expression weary. "Everything all right here, folks?" Megan straightened immediately. "All good, sir." Grant raised his glass. "Couldn't be better." Thomas looked at Darius. Sir Darius met his gaze. "Depends on your definition of all right." Thomas forced a chuckle. "We aim to please." "Then you might want to aim higher," Darius said softly. The supervisor blinked, unsure how to respond. Megan spoke first, defensive. "He's been pressing the call button repeatedly. Mr. Reed, I've done my best to accommodate." Darius's voice stayed level. "You've done your best to ignore." Thomas raised a hand. "Let's keep things calm." "They are calm," Darius said. "Calm enough to remember every detail accurately when I file a report." A thin silence settled. The engines filled it like a heartbeat. Thomas nodded awkwardly and stepped back. "I'll make sure everything's handled." He disappeared behind the curtain. Megan glared. Some people just look for trouble. Darius looked out the window. Some people create it. For a long time afterward, there was nothing but the sound of air and the soft rattle of trays. Elena reappeared to collect dishes. Her hand trembled slightly. "He shouldn't have spoken to you that way." "It's fine," Darius murmured. "Every insult is just evidence." She hesitated. Evidence of what? That systems fail quietly before they collapse loudly? At that moment, Leah Porter's message had arrived on his phone, and a new kind of electricity filled his veins. But even before he acted, he watched. Observation came first. Always. He watched Megan joke with another passenger about people playing victim these days. He watched Thomas pretend not to hear. He watched Elena bite her lip, torn between speaking and surviving. And he thought of the hundreds of employees inside North Sky who probably face the same fear every day, in smaller ways. Without cameras or headlines, that thought hurt more than the insult, because he remembered being one of them. Memory struck like turbulence. He was 26 again, in a boardroom in Houston, the only black engineer in a sea of suits. The project he had built was being presented by someone else, someone who had taken his credit and his seat. When he spoke up, the room had gone quiet. A senior partner had said, "You should be grateful to be here, son." Gratitude, the currency of oppression disguised as politeness. He had walked out that day, started his own company, and vowed never to beg for respect again. Now, nearly 20 years later, the universe had delivered a test of that vow, 35,000 feet above the ground. He typed another note in his phone. Not a message this time, just a reminder. Respect is not given by title. It's confirmed by conduct. Grant coughed beside him. "You some kind of businessman." Darius smiled faintly. "Something like that. Tech. Mostly. Man, you guys print money. I should get into that game." Darius closed the laptop. "It's not a game." Grant laughed, oblivious. "Hey, maybe you could fix North Sky for us." "Huh." Darius looked at him, eyes calm as still water. "Maybe I could." The seatbelt sign chimed for turbulence. The cabin dipped. Passengers gasped. Megan rushed to steady a tray for Mr. Peters, but ignored Darius's unbalanced cup until Elena reached over and caught it. "Got it," she whispered. He nodded. "Thank you. Again." The plane leveled. Megan shot Elena a sharp look. "I'll handle my section. Thanks." Elena flushed. "Yes, ma'am." Darius felt a pang of empathy. The system punished the kind before it reformed the cruel. He leaned slightly toward Elena. "Don't let her break your kindness." She blinked. "Sir, sometimes kindness is rebellion," he said quietly. Her eyes softened. Then I guess I'm a rebel. The rest of the flight dragged in uneasy silence. Megan performed her duties with robotic precision, avoiding his row unless absolutely necessary. Thomas remained invisible. Grant dozed off, mouth open, smelling of bourbon and arrogance. Darius sat perfectly still, his face unreadable, mind racing through numbers and possibilities. At 6:10 p.m., as the sky outside turned orange, his phone vibrated one more time with a secure message from Leah. The numbers were worse than she'd predicted. Apex Aviation's debt ratio was lethal. He could own the company before they served dessert, but that was still in the future. For now, he allowed himself one quiet thought. Every empire built on arrogance eventually sells itself to humility. He glanced once more at Megan, who was leaning against the galley wall, scrolling her phone. She laughed at something on the screen. The sound was bright, careless, unaware that the ground beneath her was already shifting. When the captain announced descent, she smiled mechanically and began her landing checklist. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be arriving shortly. Please fasten your seatbelts and ensure all devices are in airplane mode." Darius complied, folding his hands, eyes half closed. The engines roared lower, the lights dimmed. Outside the window, the Pacific shimmered in the setting sun. To everyone else, it was just another landing. To him, it was the quiet before justice. As wheels kissed the runway, applause rippled through the cabin. Grant clapped lazily. Megan thanked the passengers in her practiced voice. "We hope to see you again soon on another North Sky flight." Darius whispered, too softly for anyone but himself to hear. "Oh, you will." The plane slowed to a crawl. The engines whined. The air brakes hissed. Inside, the hierarchy still believed it was intact, but in the world of numbers and ownership, it had already collapsed. By the time they reached the gate, the messages had multiplied on his phone: confirmation codes, share transfers, signatures. The new reality waited beyond the jetway. He stood, adjusted his jacket, and looked once more at Megan Hart. She gave him a perfunctory smile, the kind reserved for someone she would forget in 30 seconds. "Thank you for flying with us, Mr. Cole." He returned it gently. "You're welcome, Ms. Hart." He stepped off the plane, his expression unreadable. Hart steady. Behind him, the cabin returned to its usual rhythm. Ahead, cameras and destiny waited. The humiliation was over. The reckoning had just begun. The hum of the jet bridge still echoed in Darius Cole's ears long after he had left the airport. He sat alone in the back seat of the black sedan that met him curbside, phone glowing faintly in his hand. The city outside rushed by in flashes of neon and glass. San Francisco was cool tonight, the fog spilling over the hills like a living thing. He had always liked cities at night. They made power look quiet. Leah Porter's voice came through his earpiece, calm but charged. "Darius, I've confirmed Apex Aviation's numbers. They're bleeding cash 4 consecutive quarters in the red. Debt ratios climbing. 2 hedge funds are dumping shares tomorrow morning." He looked out the window. How much exposure? 38% still held by institutional investors who want out. If we move now, we can control a majority before markets open. Use the silent partners, he said. "I don't want noise yet." Leah paused. "Understood. But are you sure you want to do this so fast?" He smiled slightly. "Leah, sometimes justice expires if you wait too long." The car turned down Market Street. Streetlights reflected off the glass towers that housed the same kind of people who once doubted him. He had learned to move through those spaces like a ghost, visible, unstoppable, silent. At a red light, he caught his own reflection in the window. The same calm eyes, the same steadiness that people mistook for coldness. But underneath, A storm was building. He wasn't angry for himself anymore. The slight on the plane was only the surface wound. What burned deeper was the pattern, the unending assumption that someone like him could be diminished by tone or treatment. He had built Coal Dynamics from a rented garage to a tech empire that powered defense systems and medical networks. Yet a simple flight attendant could still remind him how fragile respect could be when the world refused to see. He closed his eyes. The memory of the flight returned, uninvited. Megan's tight smile. Thomas pretending not to see. Elena's trembling kindness. The way Grant's words had slurred into arrogance. He replayed each detail until the images stopped hurting and started shaping into clarity. Every humiliation, when looked at long enough, revealed a flaw in design, and flaws could be fixed. When the car stopped at his downtown suite, he told the driver to wait. 15 minutes, he said. Then the airport. The driver nodded. Inside. The penthouse was all glass and silence. He didn't turn on the lights. The city below glowed blue through the window, patterns of wealth and isolation merging into one view. He placed his phone on the counter, pressed the intercom. "Caleb," he said. The voice of Caleb Grant, his CFO, answered instantly. "Already awake. Boss." Leah filled me in. "You're serious about this takeover. I was humiliated 3 hours ago by a company whose arrogance mirrors its balance sheet," Darius said. "Both are in free fall. I intend to fix one by acquiring the other." Caleb chuckled softly. "Cold and efficient. I like it." "Not cold," Darius corrected. "Calculated. There's a difference." He poured himself a glass of water. His hands were steady. "Set up the buyout through the Singapore fund. Keep my name off the paperwork until we close." Caleb replied. "Done. They won't know what hit them." "I'm not trying to hit them," Darius said quietly. "I'm trying to wake them up." Leah sent over the documents within the hour. Digital signatures, escrow routes, legal confirmations, all the gears of modern power moving with mechanical precision. As he scrolled through pages of numbers, his mind drifted again to Elena Ruiz. The look on her face when she had whispered, "She'll be angry if she sees." He had seen that fear before, in junior engineers afraid to call out bias, in assistants pretending not to notice injustice because they needed the paycheck. He tapped the table softly. "People shouldn't have to risk their jobs to do what's right," he murmured. "They should be rewarded for it." The thought stayed with him, quietly becoming part of his plan. When the confirmation ping came at 1:47, it was almost anticlimactic. Leah's voice followed seconds later. "It's done. Coal Dynamics, through Apex Proxies. Now holds 51% of Apex Aviation Group." Darius exhaled slowly. "Good work," Caleb added. "The market will wake up to a new owner in the morning," Darius replied. "Then tomorrow morning, North Sky Airlines will wake up to a new world." He closed the connection and walked out onto the balcony. The air was cold enough to sting. Below him, the Bay Bridge glittered like a chain of silver bones. Somewhere out there, a few thousand employees of North Sky were asleep, unaware their world had changed overnight. He wondered if Megan Hart was one of them. Maybe she was already telling her version of the story, how a difficult passenger had caused trouble. He almost pitied her. Almost. He stayed outside until the chill soaked through his suit. Then he went back inside and sat at the piano that stood against the window. He hadn't played in months. The first few notes came uncertain, then steadier. Music filled the quiet. A melody his mother used to hum when he was small, back when their world was made of struggle and hope in equal parts. He could still hear her voice. "When the world closes its doors, build your own house." He smiled faintly. He had built a house so big now that it covered the sky. When dawn came, San Francisco glowed soft gold. Darius dressed in a navy suit and tie. Simple, deliberate. He didn't need spectacle. He carried authority in silence. As he rode the elevator down, he called Leah again. "Schedule a press statement for noon," he said. "Frame it as a restructuring initiative. Mention fairness, diversity, accountability. Real words, not corporate decoration. Yes, sir." And reach out to Elena Ruiz, he added after a pause. Leah sounded surprised. "The attendant from the flight." "Yes, she'll need protection when this breaks. Make sure she's safe. I'll find her," Leah said softly. He hung up, eyes unfocused. For the first time in years, he felt something like purpose. Not revenge. Revenge was short-lived. Reform lasted longer. What he wanted was a story that outlived the headline. At 8 a.m. Headlines already filled the screens across financial networks. Coal Dynamics acquires Apex Aviation in overnight deal. Reporters called it the most surprising move of the quarter. Analysts speculated about layoffs, mergers, rebranding. None of them mentioned the first-class cabin or the quiet insult that had started it. Only he knew that truth. By mid-morning, Thomas Reed and Megan Hart were summoned to a sudden meeting at North Sky headquarters. Megan had dressed in her best uniform, nervous but excited. Rumor said the company had been bought, maybe by a foreign investor. She imagined promotion lists, new bonuses. Thomas tried to calm her nerves, though his own were shaking. "We'll be fine," he said. "We've been here long enough. Whoever bought us will need experience." Neither of them expected to see the man from seat 2A walking into the boardroom. The boardroom windows overlooked the runways. Jets taxied below like obedient silver birds. Executives murmured, eyes on their phones. Then the door opened, and Darius entered. Flanked by Leah and Caleb, the room quieted. Someone whispered, "That's the guy from Coal Dynamics." He walked to the head of the table without hesitation. His presence filled the space, not loud, but absolute. He placed a folder on the table, looked around once, and spoke. "Good morning. As of 2 Pacific Time, Coal Dynamics has acquired controlling interest in Apex Aviation Group, effective immediately. That includes North Sky Airlines." Gasps, whispers, shifting chairs. Megan's mouth fell open. Thomas froze. Darius continued. Voice even. "There will be changes. Effective today, all leadership roles will undergo review. We'll also begin a full audit of workplace conduct and culture, starting with in-flight services." His eyes moved briefly, deliberately, toward Megan, then Thomas. "Accountability will be standard, not optional." No one spoke. The silence felt like gravity. A communications officer raised a trembling hand. "Sir." "Will this affect operations?" Darius replied. "Yes. It will affect everything." He gestured to Leah, who distributed packets outlining the Equa-Air Initiative, a new program focusing on fairness and service integrity. "We'll rebuild this airline," Darius said, "not just in the air, but in its values." Megan tried to find words. "Mr. Cole?" I didn't realize," he looked at her, "that I could sit in 2A and own the company at the same time." She flushed. I know what you meant," he said quietly. "You don't need to explain. You only need to learn." Her eyes dropped to the table. The silence pressed heavier. Thomas cleared his throat. "Sir, I've always tried to maintain professionalism, and yet you ignored unprofessional conduct in your own cabin." Darius interrupted, still calm. "We'll discuss that later. For now, you're both on administrative leave pending investigation." Neither argued. Some power was too clean to resist. After the meeting, Leah caught up to him in the corridor. "That was intense," she said. Necessary, he replied. If leadership tolerates rot, the structure collapses. We're just removing mold before rebuilding. Caleb joined them, handing over a tablet. Media's already running the takeover story. You're trending worldwide. Darius sighed softly. They'll think it's about ego. Let them. The truth is slower, but it lasts. He walked past the large window again. Outside, a North Sky jet lifted into the sky. For the first time, he didn't feel resentment. He felt ownership of the narrative. He whispered, "Fly better." That night, when the world kept buzzing with headlines, Darius returned to his office. He stood before a whiteboard covered in notes, organizational charts, training programs, diversity frameworks. Elena's name was on the list under Internal Ethics Advisory. Leah had found her already. She would be offered a new role the next morning. He leaned against the desk, exhaustion seeping into his bones. He should have felt triumph. But what he felt was clarity, the kind that humbles instead of inflates. This wasn't the end. It was the start of an uncomfortable transformation that would make others see what he had seen all his life. As he looked out the window toward the sleeping city, he whispered to himself, "Tomorrow. They'll call it a business move, but I'll know it was a human one." And for the first time since that flight, he smiled. Morning light poured through the glass walls of the North Sky headquarters. Reporters swarmed outside, their microphones and cameras pressed against the barricades, trying to catch a glimpse of the man who had just rewritten aviation history overnight. Inside, the air felt electric, half fear, half fascination. Employees whispered in hallways, glancing at each other with wide eyes. On the top floor, Darius Cole stood by the window, hands in his pockets, watching the chaos below. He looked neither proud nor angry, just focused. Beside him, Leah Porter held a tablet, reading updates aloud. The markets opened with Apex Aviation up 40% in the first hour. Investors are stunned. They're calling it the boldest takeover this year. Caleb Grant, the CFO, laughed quietly. They'll be even more stunned when they realize the motive wasn't money. Darius turned. They'll understand soon enough. We don't rebuild companies just for profit. We rebuild people. He walked toward the long conference table where folders were neatly arranged. On each one was a name department heads, regional managers, training directors. This is where the real work begins, he said. Policy without culture is decoration. We start with culture. Leah nodded. The Equa Air Initiative launches this afternoon. HR has the new training modules ready. Good. And make sure Elena Ruiz's appointment is finalized. She'll oversee passenger experience. Caleb raised an eyebrow. The young attendant from the flight. That's quite a rise. She earned it, Darius replied simply. Courage deserves elevation. He looked back out the window. You know, Caleb, people think change comes from power. It doesn't. It comes from example. If one person dares to act right in a room full of silence, that's where it starts. Caleb smiled. You sound like your mother again. Darius's eyes softened. She taught me that dignity is the loudest quiet there is. Across the city, Megan Hart sat alone in her apartment. The blinds were closed, the TV volume low. News anchors were talking about Darius Cole, the black CEO who had bought Apex Aviation overnight. Every network replayed the same clip of him walking through the airport, calm and unreadable, cameras flashing like thunder around him. Her coffee had gone cold. She hadn't slept. Thomas had called twice, saying corporate wanted statements, that the investigation had already begun. She kept replaying the flight in her mind, trying to justify each moment. I didn't mean it that way. I was just doing my job. But the excuses rang hollow now. What haunted her wasn't what she'd done, it was how easy it had felt. She remembered his expression on the plane, steady, unshaken, eyes that saw everything and judged nothing. That calm was worse than anger. Anger would have given her something to fight. His silence had left her alone with herself. When the email came from corporate HR requesting her presence at headquarters, she stared at it for a long time. The words mandatory interview seemed to echo. She dressed carefully, choosing a neutral suit, pulling her hair back tight, as if tidiness could erase guilt. By noon, the main atrium of North Sky was a stage. Cameras lined the balcony, employees gathered in clusters, and a giant screen displayed the words, "A New Horizon, the Equa Air Initiative." Darius stepped to the podium. The crowd hushed. He didn't need to raise his voice. His presence was enough. 3 months ago, he began. This company was losing altitude not just in numbers, but in integrity. Yesterday, we corrected its course. Today, we begin the climb. He paused, letting the quiet settle. The future of air travel isn't just about efficiency. It's about empathy. Every passenger who boards our planes deserves dignity. No matter their seat, no matter their skin, no matter their story. The room stayed silent. A few employees looked down, ashamed. Others lifted their heads, curious, inspired. I didn't buy North Sky to expand my empire. Darius continued, I bought it to prove something larger, that fairness isn't a weakness. It's a competitive advantage. Because when people feel respected, they give their best. When they're seen, they soar. Applause rose slowly, then built into something stronger. Cameras flashed. Leah watched from the side. Proud but cautious, she knew the real test would begin after the applause faded. Darius stepped away from the podium, walking through the crowd. He made eye contact with people as he passed, nodding once, a silent promise of accountability. Near the back, Elena Ruiz stood in a navy suit, her name badge newly printed Director of Service Integrity. She smiled when their eyes met. He returned it, faint but genuine. After the event, reporters surrounded him. One shouted, Mr. Cole, is it true this decision was personal, that you experienced discrimination firsthand? He stopped. Every decision is personal when it affects people, he said simply, but this isn't revenge, it's reform. Later that afternoon, HR called Megan into a small conference room. The walls were too white, the chairs too clean. Thomas was already there, pale and sweating. A compliance officer greeted them politely, then pressed record on a small device. We're here to discuss conduct on Flight 432, she said. Megan's throat tightened. I didn't. The officer raised a hand. You'll have a chance to speak. First, we have testimony from a witness. She pressed play on another device. Elena's voice filled the room, calm but firm. He was ignored repeatedly. He pressed the service button 3 times. I saw Megan turn it off without responding. I gave him water myself because I couldn't stand to watch it anymore. Megan closed her eyes. Shame burned hot behind her lids. She barely heard the rest, the dates, the times, the procedural questions. When it was her turn, she could only whisper, I didn't think it mattered that much. Thomas shifted beside her. We were understaffed. Tensions were high. The officer interrupted. You both failed to address the situation appropriately. Mr. Reed, as supervisor, your inaction is a separate violation. When the session ended, Megan walked out into the hallway, dizzy. She saw Elena at the far end, talking quietly with HR staff. For a moment, she wanted to approach her, to say something, anything. But what could she possibly say? I'm sorry, felt too small. She turned instead and walked out of the building. That evening, Darius sat in his new office, the same one where North Sky's former CEO had once hung a framed quote about winning markets through dominance. He'd replaced it with a photograph of the sky, endless and blue. Leah entered quietly. "The internal reports are complete," she said. "Megan Hart and Thomas Reed are suspended pending retraining and final review. HR recommends termination." He looked up. "Termination doesn't teach. It only erases. Send them to the bias rehabilitation program we designed with Stanford. If they complete it, they can reapply." Leah blinked. "You're giving them a second chance." "I'm giving them a test," he replied. "Redemption is a better teacher than punishment." She nodded slowly. "You're going to get criticized for that." He smiled faintly. "Let them criticize. I'm not building approval. I'm building a model." He stood, walked to the window again. The sunset painted the glass in gold and crimson. "Leah, remember what I told you after my first contract with the government?" She smiled. "You said, power isn't what you hold, it's what you fix." "Exactly." This he gestured to the skyline. "This is fixing." A week passed. News cycles spun wild. The coal takeover became the headline across every network. Business analysts praised his precision. Social commentators hailed him as a symbol of measured justice. Airline unions applauded his stance on fairness. Elena Ruiz adjusted quickly to her new role. She was still nervous in meetings, still careful with words. But Darius made sure she was never invisible. During one training session, she told the new hires, "Respect isn't policy, it's practice." The room had gone quiet, listening. She was learning to speak power into existence. Meanwhile, Megan struggled through the rehabilitation program. It was harder than she expected, long hours of confronting her own assumptions. Group discussions that peeled back layers she didn't know she had. The facilitators didn't shame, they guided slowly. Understanding replaced defensiveness. She wrote in her journal one night, "Maybe it wasn't about him. Maybe it was about everything I refused to see." Back at headquarters, Darius reviewed performance data from the first week under new leadership. Complaints had dropped 40%. Passenger satisfaction climbed. But what pleased him most wasn't the numbers. It was the tone of employee feedback. "We feel seen. We feel safe." Caleb entered with a grin. "You realize you've turned a scandal into a movement." Darius chuckled softly. "It's not a movement yet. Movements require believers." "You've got plenty," Caleb said. "Even the media loves you. Today they love me." Darius said, "Tomorrow they'll look for the next story." "That's fine, as long as the lesson sticks." Leah poked her head in. "Sir, you have a visitor, Megan Hart." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "That's brave." Darius nodded. "Send her in." Megan entered quietly, holding a folder. She looked smaller somehow, not in stature, but in certainty. "Mr. Cole," she began, "I wanted to thank you for allowing me into the program. I've completed the coursework. I don't expect to return. But I wanted you to know. I understand now." He gestured for her to sit. "Understanding is a start. What did you learn?" "That decency isn't instinct. It's discipline," she said. "And that apology means nothing without change." She hesitated. "I'm sorry for how I treated you." He studied her face. There was no performance in her tone, just exhaustion and honesty. "Apology accepted," he said. "Use it well. Change someone else's flight someday." She smiled faintly, tears in her eyes. "I will." When she left, Leah whispered, "You really believe people can change?" He looked at her. "If I didn't, I wouldn't be doing any of this." 2 months later, the first Equa Air report went public. North Sky's reputation had rebounded faster than analysts predicted. More importantly, the airline had become a case study for corporate transformation. Business schools wanted Darius to speak. Governments wanted to partner. Employees called the new approach the coal standard, but he avoided interviews. He said the work wasn't finished. One evening, as he walked through the terminal before boarding a flight, he saw Elena speaking with passengers at the gate, calm and confident. Her voice carried warmth that felt genuine. Passengers smiled back. It was the kind of simple, human moment he had dreamed of. When she noticed him, she grinned. "Mr. Cole?" "Taking a flight again." He laughed. "Thought I'd see how our service feels from the seat this time." She winked. "You'll get treated like everyone else." "That's exactly what I want," he said. As he settled into 2A again, he glanced around. The cabin atmosphere felt lighter. The attendants moved with ease. No tension, no hierarchy beyond professionalism. A middle-aged man of color sat across from him, greeted warmly by the staff. He smiled quietly. The system was healing. He closed his eyes as the plane lifted into the sky. The engines hummed like music, steady and sure. The past few months had been a lesson not just in justice, but in restraint. Power used to punish was easy. Power used to elevate required faith. And that faith, he realized, was what truly changed the world. He opened his notebook and wrote a single line, "Equality is the quiet form of excellence." When he looked out the window again, the clouds rolled beneath him, endless and white. Somewhere above them, the sun was still burning steady, unseen, inevitable. And this time, the flight felt exactly as it should, ordinary, equal, human. The morning sky over San Francisco shimmered like brushed steel, streaked with clouds that caught the first light of dawn. In the distance, planes rose and fell in rhythmic grace, silent metal birds tracing the future Darius Cole had reimagined. From the top floor of North Sky's new headquarters, he watched them move through the fog, each one a symbol of change taking flight. He had not slept. The night before, his mind had been too full of reports, of voices, of faces, of Megan's quiet apology, Elena's radiant growth, the cautious optimism of employees who had once been afraid to speak. The world now saw him as a titan of reform, but he felt more like a caretaker trying to keep a fragile garden alive. Leah Porter entered the office with a folder in hand. "Morning updates," she said. "Public sentiment still climbing. Equa Air initiative is trending for the third day. Passenger satisfaction is up 70%. She smiled. That's never happened in aviation history. Darius turned toward her, his expression thoughtful. "Progress is easy when the world's watching. The test comes when it isn't." She nodded. "Then maybe it's time we test it." He looked down at the folder she placed on the table. Inside were letters, some from employees, some from passengers, stories of gratitude, transformation, and still a few stories of resistance. He read one aloud. A customer wrote, "For the first time, I felt like I belonged on a plane, not as a traveler, but as a person." He closed it slowly. That's the change that matters. Caleb Grant arrived moments later, tie slightly crooked, holding 2 coffees. "You look like a man who hasn't slept in a week," he said, handing one to Darius. "Sleep is overrated when you're rebuilding culture," Darius replied with a faint smile. Caleb chuckled. "You sound like a philosopher trapped in a CEO's body." "Maybe both," Darius said. "Philosophy builds systems. Systems build futures." Leah interrupted gently. "You have a press briefing at 10, a leadership meeting at noon, and the employee forum at 3. HR also requested your approval for the final decision on Thomas Reed." Darius leaned back in his chair. He's still under review. Yes, his record is clean before that flight, but he failed to act. Failure to act is still a choice, Darius said softly. But I believe in second chances for those who learn. Caleb tilted his head. You gave Megan one. Are you giving him the same yes? But in a different way. She faced her reflection and changed. He'll face his silence and speak. Leah smiled faintly. You're building redemption into the system. Justice without mercy is just vengeance in disguise. He replied. Hours later, Darius stood backstage at the press hall. Dozens of reporters filled the seats, waiting. North Sky's logo glowed behind the podium, now rebranded with the slogan, Fly Fair, Fly Equal. The air buzzed with anticipation. Leah whispered, Are you ready? He adjusted his jacket. Always. When he stepped on stage, the applause was polite at first, then stronger, cameras flashed. He waited for quiet. 3 months ago, he began. I took control of this company in the middle of a storm. Some said it was about power. It never was. It was about responsibility. He paused, his voice calm but firm. When I boarded Flight 432 that day, I was reminded that respect is still a luxury for too many. But we've proved that fairness can be the foundation of profit, not its enemy. The numbers show growth, but the real growth is in how we treat each other. He looked directly into the cameras. From this day forward, North Sky will be more than an airline. It will be a declaration that dignity can fly at 35,000 feet. The applause thundered. Reporters shouted questions. Flashes exploded. One journalist asked, Mr. Cole, do you forgive the people who disrespected you that day? He smiled slightly. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself from anger so you can focus on building something better. Another asked, Do you think this model can be replicated elsewhere, everywhere? Darius said simply, Because equality is good business. When the conference ended, he shook hands with his team. Leah's eyes shone with pride. You turned pain into policy, she said. He smiled faintly. That's the only kind worth turning. Meanwhile, in a quiet training room across the building, Thomas Reed sat alone with a notebook open in front of him. He had been assigned to conduct a new leadership course for supervisors, a requirement of his reinstatement. The irony wasn't lost on him. Teaching integrity after nearly losing his own felt heavy. Elena Ruiz entered the room with a clipboard. You're early, she said gently. Habit. Thomas replied, I used to come early to flights too. Before I forgot why I started, Elena smiled. Then this is your takeoff. He chuckled softly. You're good at that, turning pain into metaphor. I learned from the best, she said, glancing toward the upper floors where Darius's office stood. Thomas looked down at his notes. He could have fired me. I still don't know why he didn't. Because he believes silence can be broken, Elena said. And because people can change when someone finally believes they can. Thomas nodded slowly. Then I guess it's time to prove him right. That afternoon, Darius hosted the internal employee forum in the auditorium. It was packed pilots, attendants, engineers, clerks, all gathered to hear him speak. But this time, he didn't stand on the stage. He sat among them, microphone in hand. I'm not here to give another speech, he said. I'm here to listen, one by one. Employees stood and shared their stories. Some thanked him, some challenged him. One mechanic said, You talk about dignity. But what about pay equality? Darius smiled. Then let's fix that next. The crowd laughed softly, surprised by his humility. Then a young woman stood up near the back. Sir. What made you do it? She asked. Buy an entire company just to prove a point. He thought for a moment. Because the point was bigger than me. It was about proving that a system that excludes can be redesigned. Sometimes the only way to change the rules is to own the rule book. The room went quiet. After the session, employees lined up to shake his hand. Elena stood beside him, guiding people, smiling proudly. "They're starting to believe," she whispered. "That's all I ever wanted," he said. Later that evening, the office was nearly empty. Darius remained by the window, the city glowing beneath him. Leah brought him another report. "Profit margins up again. Investors are calling you a miracle worker." He chuckled softly. "Miracles are just hard work people don't see." She hesitated. "You could step back now. You know, let the system run itself." He looked out at the skyline. "Not yet. Change needs roots before it can survive without watering." His phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. He opened it. "Mr. Cole, this is Megan Hart. I just wanted you to know I've joined a nonprofit that trains service workers in empathy and inclusion. Thank you for not giving up on me." He smiled quietly, typed a short reply. "Good skies ahead. Megan." Leah noticed his expression. "Good news. Better than good," he said. "Proof that change can outlive intention." Weeks later, at San Francisco International Airport. Darius prepared to board another flight, this time as a speaker at a global ethics summit in Geneva. The boarding area looked different now. Posters of diverse teams, smiling faces, the Equa-Air slogan glowing proudly on walls. He walked through the terminal unnoticed by most. That was how he preferred it. Power was best worn invisibly. As he reached the gate, Elena appeared in uniform, radiant in the company's new colors. "Mr. Cole," she greeted. "Your seat's ready." He smiled. "Director Ruiz, shouldn't you be running this place instead of greeting me? I like being where people are," she said. "Besides, it feels right to welcome the man who taught us how to start over." He nodded. "You've done more than start over. You've made it fly." As he boarded, passengers glanced up politely. No second looks, no hesitation. The cabin felt alive with quiet respect. A small detail caught his eye: an older black couple sitting comfortably in first class, smiling as a flight attendant offered them champagne. Megan's replacement, a young man named Aaron, treated them with genuine warmth. It was such a simple scene, yet it carried all the weight of everything he had fought for. He took his seat 2A again, of course, and exhaled. Leah sat beside him, laptop open. "You ready for another long flight?" she asked. He smiled. Every flight feels shorter when the skies are fair. As the plane began to taxi, he looked out the window. The runway stretched ahead like a clean slate. Engines roared, lifting the aircraft into open blue. The city fell away beneath them, shrinking to a memory. Leah glanced over. "You ever think about that first flight, the one that started all this every day?" he said softly. "It reminds me what power is for." "And what's that?" she asked. He turned to her, eyes steady, to make sure no one else ever has to feel small at 35,000 feet. The clouds rose to meet them, sunlight spilling through in golden waves. Darius closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the vibration of the engines beneath his hands. The sound was the same as it had been months ago, but now it meant something different. It no longer hummed with humiliation. It sang with renewal. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to rest. The world outside was vast, equal, and moving forward. And for once, he didn't need to steer. The system he'd built would carry the weight now. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard North Sky Airlines. Our flight path is clear, and our skies are open." Darius opened his eyes, smiled faintly, and whispered, "That's how it should always be." And as the plane climbed higher, sunlight touching his face, He felt a peace he hadn't known in years. Justice had landed. Equality was airborne. 2 years had passed since that fateful flight. San Francisco had changed little on the surface. The skyline still glimmered like a crown of glass. The sea fog still rolled through the bridges each morning, but for Darius Cole, everything felt different. Time had softened the sharp edges of anger and turned them into quiet conviction. The Equa-Air initiative had become more than company policy. It was now a global movement, studied in universities, cited in leadership conferences, and replicated by corporations that had once laughed at the idea of empathy in business. Every month, Darius received letters from airline workers, passengers, and CEOs. They all said the same thing in different words. You reminded us what dignity looks like. He had become a symbol not of power, but of possibility. And yet, as the world praised his transformation of North Sky, he remained humble, almost detached from the spotlight. Fame had never interested him. What mattered were the unseen ripples. The quiet ways lives were altered by a single act of fairness. This morning, he sat in his home office, sunlight filtering through tall windows, coffee steaming beside a stack of reports. The numbers glowed green across his screen, profits steady, employee retention at record highs, complaints at historic lows. But he wasn't looking at the numbers. His eyes were on a framed photograph on his desk. It was of his mother, standing outside their old neighborhood home, apron dusted with flour, smiling at the camera. Below it, a small quote she used to say, "The world may judge your worth by noise, but character is built in quiet." He touched the frame gently. "You were right again, Mom." The door opened softly. Leah Porter stepped in, holding a folder. "Morning. Darius. You have the press meeting at 10 and a call with the UN Ethics Committee at noon. They want you to keynote the Global Justice Forum." He smiled faintly. "And what's your opinion?" "Leah, I think they finally realized you're more than a businessman." He chuckled. "Let's not tell them I'm still figuring that out." Leah placed the folder down. "Before that, there's someone here to see you. Said it's important." He raised an eyebrow. "Who?" She hesitated. "Megan Hart." The name made him pause. "Send her in." Moments later, Megan entered the office. She looked different, simpler clothes, lighter eyes, no makeup. A calm energy that hadn't been there before. "Mr. Cole," she said softly. "It's been a while." He nodded. "Too long. Please, sit." She took a seat across from him. "I won't take much of your time. I just wanted to thank you in person for what he asked, for not ending my story where it went wrong." She said, "I've been working with the Service for Change Foundation helping retrain attendants across smaller airlines. We've reached over 1,000 staff so far. I wanted you to know that the seed you planted grew." He smiled gently. "I didn't plant it. You did. The moment you decided to change." She looked down, tears glinting. "Maybe. But you gave me permission to believe I could." They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, a plane roared overhead, low and steady. Megan wiped her eyes. "I heard you're planning to step down from North Sky." He nodded slowly. "It's almost time. The system runs itself now. That's the goal of leadership, to make yourself unnecessary." She smiled. "You really believe that completely," he said. "When the structure becomes stronger than the man who built it, you've succeeded." Before she left, she handed him a small envelope. "Something for you," she said. "A letter from one of the students in our program." He waited until she was gone before opening it. The handwriting was careful. Young. "Dear Mr. Cole, my name is Carla. I used to think people like me couldn't belong in customer service because of my accent. But then we studied your story. It made me want to try. Last week, a passenger told me my kindness made his day. Thank you for helping people like me see ourselves differently. Darius folded the letter slowly, his throat tight. That's the return on investment that matters, he whispered. Later that day, the North Sky Auditorium was filled again. Employees gathered not for an announcement, but for something more intimate. Darius had requested a reflection forum, a closing circle to mark his transition out of daily leadership. He stood on stage, no teleprompter, no speech cards, only honesty. When I bought this company, he began. People called it revenge. Maybe part of me thought so too. But what I learned is that revenge has an expiration date. Justice doesn't. He scanned the faces before him, some old, some new. You've all made this place better than I could have imagined. Not because of me, but because of what you chose to become. He gestured toward the crowd. Elena Ruiz, who turned compassion into structure. Thomas Reed, who turned silence into guidance. Megan Hart, who turned shame into service. Every one of you taught me something about grace. The room fell silent, heavy with emotion. I'll be stepping back after this quarter, he said. Not because I'm tired, but because I believe the skies are safe in your hands now. North Sky isn't mine anymore, it's ours. As he finished, the crowd stood in applause. Some cried, some simply nodded, understanding the weight of what they were witnessing. When he stepped down from the stage, Elena met him halfway, tears in her eyes. You changed everything, she said. He smiled softly. No, Elena. We just remembered what we were supposed to be. A week later, Darius sat on the balcony of his hillside home, overlooking the Pacific. The horizon stretched endless and golden. Caleb joined him, carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. To retirement, Caleb said, raising his glass. Let's not use that word. Darius laughed. I'm retiring from titles, not purpose. Caleb grinned. So what's next? Another empire? Something smaller, Darius said. Something that still matters. He pulled out a folder and handed it over. I'm starting the Cole Foundation for Ethical Leadership. Grants, mentorship, training. For kids who think they don't belong in rooms of power. Caleb nodded, impressed. Teaching them to rewrite the rules instead of begging to play. Exactly, Darius said. That's how we stop history from repeating. They drank quietly for a while, watching the sun dip lower. You ever think about that flight, Caleb asked? Every day, Darius said. It reminds me that change doesn't start when you're comfortable. It starts when someone forces you to stand up. Caleb smiled. And now, Darius said softly. I'm standing still long enough to enjoy it. Months later, the Global Justice Forum was held in Geneva. Leaders from over 40 nations attended. The air buzzed with expectation. When Darius stepped onto the stage, applause thundered through the hall, but he raised a hand, humbly quieting the crowd. He began his keynote simply. I'm not here as a CEO, he said. I'm here as a man who once pressed a call button 3 times and was ignored. The room went silent. I didn't buy an airline to make a point. I did it because I wanted to live in a world where fairness wasn't a favor, where dignity wasn't optional. We can write all the policies we want, but change begins when people decide to look each other in the eye. He paused. If we can teach our systems to see people before profit, then maybe we can call ourselves civilized. When he finished, the audience rose to its feet. The applause didn't end for minutes. Back in San Francisco, North Sky continued to soar. The airline's new slogan, "We see you," adorned billboards across the country. Elena Ruiz became Chief Culture Officer. Leah led the Cole Foundation. Thomas became an international trainer for ethical leadership. And Megan, now a recognized advocate, spoke at universities about second chances. As for Darius, he lived quietly. He traveled often, always flying commercial, always sitting in seat 2A when he could. It became a symbol, a personal ritual, a reminder of where transformation began. One spring morning, on a flight to New York, a young attendant approached him mid-flight. "Mr. Cole, I just wanted to say thank you," she said shyly. He looked up, surprised. "For what? For creating this company. I started here because of the Equa-Air program. My mom used to clean planes at night. Now I serve in them." "She's proud." He smiled, moved beyond words. "You should be proud too," he said gently. "You're part of the story now." As she walked away, he turned toward the window. The clouds drifted below like soft memories. Somewhere between sky and earth, he realized this was peace, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of purpose. He thought of his mother again, her voice clear in his memory. "Don't wait for the world to treat you right. Teach it how." He whispered, "I did, Mom." And they learned. The captain's voice broke the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into New York on behalf of North Sky Airlines. Thank you for flying with us." Darius smiled, closing his eyes. The engines hummed their steady lullaby. The same sound that once carried his humiliation now carried his legacy. When the plane touched down, applause rippled softly through the cabin. He opened his eyes, looked around at the faces diverse, peaceful, equal, and for the first time, he felt that the world, at least in this small metal sky, had finally learned to fly right. The world had learned his story, but only a few truly understood it. 2 years after stepping down from North Sky, Darius Cole had become more myth than man. His name appeared in textbooks, case studies, documentaries. Universities taught the Cole model as an example of moral capitalism. CEOs quoted his lines about empathy in boardrooms they once ruled by fear. Yet for Darius, none of that fame mattered. What mattered were the faces of people he'd never meet, the workers who now stood taller because someone had once insisted they mattered. On an ordinary morning in spring, he walked along the marina green, the ocean breeze cold against his skin. Joggers passed by. Waves slapped against the rocks. Gulls circled lazily overhead. San Francisco had that way of feeling both alive and timeless, as if it held a quiet respect for people who rebuilt themselves. He sat on a bench overlooking the water, a paper cup of coffee in his hand. Across the bay, planes descended toward the airport, silver streaks glinting in the sun. Each one carried hundreds of stories, people leaving, returning, forgiving, beginning again. Leah Porter had once told him, "The measure of a leader is what continues after he leaves." Watching those planes, he realized she was right. The systems he built were still flying without him. North Sky had expanded to Europe, Asia, Africa, each new branch adopting the same foundation: equality before hierarchy, empathy before efficiency. A small boy stopped in front of him, holding a model airplane painted with the North Sky logo. "Are you Mr. Cole?" the boy asked shyly. Darius smiled. "I used to be, yes. My dad says you made flying better," the boy said. Darius leaned forward. "No. I just reminded people how to be kind up there." The boy grinned. "I want to be a pilot one day." "Then promise me something," Darius said. "When you fly, make sure everyone feels they belong on your plane." "I promise," the boy said, before running off to his parents. Darius watched him go, a warmth spreading through his chest. That, he thought, is legacy not headlines, not profits, but a promise passed from one soul to another. His phone buzzed. A message from Leah. Need you at the foundation. Big day. He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked back toward the car. The Cole Foundation for Ethical Leadership had grown faster than anyone predicted. What started as a handful of workshops had become a global network mentoring thousands of young leaders in business, government, and education. Its motto was carved into the marble wall of the entrance: change the system, not just the story. Inside, the main auditorium buzzed with energy. Reporters, students, and guests filled the seats. Leah greeted him at the door, radiant as always. You're late, she teased. Legends should arrive fashionably late. He replied with a grin. She rolled her eyes. You're impossible. Come on, Elena's already on stage. He followed her inside. On the stage stood Elena Ruiz, now in her early 30s, confident and composed. The crowd hung on her every word. Dignity isn't something we offer when it's easy, she said. It's what we hold on to when it's inconvenient. Mr. Cole taught me that, and today we honor him not for what he built, but for what he believed that respect is scalable. Applause filled the room. Darius stayed near the back, unnoticed, just as he liked it. Watching her, he felt pride mixed with humility. She was no longer the nervous attendant whispering apologies in first class. She was a leader, shaping a generation. Leah leaned in and whispered, "She's about to surprise you." Elena smiled at the audience. "I'm proud to announce that starting next year, the Cole Foundation will partner with airlines worldwide to implement the Global Fair Skies program, a continuation of the Equa Air initiative, expanded across continents. And it's only fitting that we name it in honor of the man who started it all. Please welcome Mr. Darius Cole." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras turned, flashes blinding. Darius hesitated for a moment, then walked slowly toward the stage. When he reached the podium, he looked out at the faces young, hopeful, diverse. "You make an old man feel seen," he said with a soft laugh. The audience chuckled warmly. He took a breath. "I've been called many things in the last few years: CEO, reformer, miracle worker, but what I really am is proof that sometimes pain can be the most honest teacher." He paused, letting the weight of silence settle. "I don't stand here because I was strong. I stand here because I refused to stay silent. And if there's one lesson I want to leave you with, it's this: you don't need power to change the world. You just need courage to start where you are." The applause rose again, not thunderous this time, but heartfelt, an echo that seemed to fill every corner of the room. After the ceremony, reporters tried to surround him, but he slipped away quietly. Leah found him outside, by the fountain in the courtyard. "You always disappear when people want to celebrate you," she said. "I like letting them own the moment," he replied. She smiled. "You realize this is your moment, too." He shook his head. "No, Leah. My moment ended the day that little girl named Elena found her voice. Everything after that is theirs." That evening, he returned home, the sunset painting the bay in orange and pink. He poured himself a cup of tea and sat on the porch. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. On the small table beside him sat a stack of letters: students, workers, leaders writing to thank him. But one envelope stood out, marked from an address in New York. He opened it carefully. "Dear Mr. Cole, I met you once on a flight when I was a kid. You told me to make everyone feel like they belonged on my plane. I kept that promise. I'm writing this from 30,000 feet. I'm the captain now. Thank you for believing in a world that could fly fair." He smiled, tears blurring the words. The world had come full circle. Leah's voice echoed in his memory. You turned a single injustice into an entire generation's awakening. But he didn't think of it that way. To him, it had always been simpler. He had just wanted to fix something broken. He leaned back, watching another plane cross the twilight sky. The engine's low hum carried across the wind, steady and alive. Somewhere inside that aircraft, strangers shared air and trust a miracle that still amazed him. The sound faded slowly until only the waves remained. He whispered to himself, "That's the echo beyond the clouds, the sound of change that keeps flying even when you stop." He closed his eyes, letting the breeze move through his hair. The horizon blurred into night. For the first time in years, he felt no weight, no mission, no unfinished business, just peace. Because in the end, Darius Cole had not changed the world by force. He had changed it by invitation, by showing people that respect could be as powerful as revolution. And somewhere high above, another North Sky jet streaked across the heavens, engines whispering the legacy he left behind. Fly fair, fly equal, fly human. The story of Darius Cole isn't just about one flight, it's about how quiet strength can reshape the world. His journey reminds us that dignity does not need to shout, and real power is never proven through anger, but through action, guided by integrity. In life, we will all face moments where we are misunderstood, overlooked, or disrespected. What defines us is not how loud we respond, but how wisely we choose to rise. Darius didn't seek revenge, he sought reform. He didn't destroy to punish, he rebuilt to educate. That difference turns pain into progress. For older generations who've seen both injustice and change, his story offers a gentle truth. It's never too late to lead with grace, to turn personal wounds into lessons for the next generation. Justice, when rooted in empathy, doesn't just balance the scales, it lifts everyone. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If it touched your heart, inspired reflection, or reminded you that quiet strength still matters, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing real, emotional stories that remind the world what dignity, courage, and compassion look like. Stay kind, stay human, and remember every act of respect creates a sky wide enough for us all to fly in.